email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or
The
news.
single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Kristen Sanderson, VP of Customer Advocacy and the Chief Diversity Officer for GE Digital. We resume the conversation as Kristen discusses her priorities for 2023.
My primary goal, building that sense of, building inclusion and that sense of belonging across everyone in the team. And so if I were to think about some of the key things that I'm focused on for 2023, it's, I want to continue to build and support a diverse team through our diversity partnerships, and introducing peer programs like peer mentoring. That's a new program that we're introducing in 23. Growing and supporting our vibrant communities. So I talked about the ERGs already, our employee resource groups, really just making sure, trying to get everybody I can into those communities, into a place where they can celebrate culture and grow together and connect, and build their skills. And then also the third is building the knowledge within our organization for how to grow and nurture diverse teams. I really want everyone to be able to bring their whole selves and participate in full, and really just that training and understanding and helping everybody learn about how to do that well is a key goal for us as well. And overall, just, listening, improving all of us to learn how to listen to everyone in our teams and get the best insights and the best action from everyone.
So how can somebody like myself as a leader of my organization, how can I embrace some of these things you're talking about? What can I do? What can I do to be better?
From my perspective, I first of all, wanting to do better is step number one. I really encourage people to get to know their employees very well, understand who they are, what cultures, what makes them tick, what are the different things that they celebrate, and how does that affect their day job? What is their personal situation? I've seen a lot of things where, for example, people in some cultures sit in multi-generational homes.
Right.
So when they're working from home, it's very different. Learning how to connect the dots. And so there's a lot of training you can take that you can connect to. And that's what I was saying. We work with some diversity partners that bring some training. Everybody in our group takes unconscious bias training. And again, this is just about understanding how what you do and say can somehow impact people in a way that you may not have anticipated or intended. And so really being conscious about that, your language and your actions, I think is really important.
What is unconscious bias?
Unconscious bias. That's some of the things you might say or do that are offensive to somebody that you may not realize.
Okay.
Are offensive. So you make a comment. Well, let me just give you a quick example. So I have a sign in front of me, by the way. It has two things on it. It says guys and good morning. So things like, for example, I try to, hey guys, that's not, most people don't get offended at that, but I try so hard not to say that, to say, hey everyone, hello everyone, how are you doing today? Good morning. I get on a call that has a global audience and I say good morning. Guess what? It's afternoon and evening for some people and they're spending their evening talking to you. So just being considerate. Really, it's being considerate.
Right.
But understanding the examples around unconscious bias and things, again, that you may be unintentionally saying that aren't having the impact that you think they are.
Usually I find they'll let you know it's evening here. If you say good morning, they'll say, well, it's my evening.
Exactly.
Just to make sure you're aware of it.
Exactly.
What is one of the most common leadership communication mistakes you typically see, and how do you suggest resolving it?
What I see a lot is assumption in leadership communication. When we talk as a leadership team, we talk about the things important to our customers, important to our business in the context that we understand it because we're dealing with it every day. A lot of times when I see a leader communicating, they will take that same context and apply it to a broader audience. And it doesn't always understandable. You really got to step back and say, what are the acronyms that are going to be understood at this level? Does everybody understand what's going on here? Do I need to step back and explain the situation? Do I need to, what do I need to do to bring everybody along with that context setting so that when I'm speaking about it and setting action, everybody's going to know what I'm talking about, and they're going to be able to come along with me on this journey. And that's really, if I could cite many examples. We just talked about inclusive language. That's one of the things, but it's not just that. I mean, think about it. I've seen so many all hands where, we attempt to show financial information to people with a technical background, and it's well intended. It's not always understood. And so, how do you make that information more consumable, and how do you make it so that the implication of that information, what you're trying to get across, really gets across? That to me is the biggest issue. And again, the way to solve it is just to really, test it with an audience, make sure that you run through it, make sure that you are thinking about it, perhaps, pull in somebody who is not part of the team that put this together to make sure that the message plays well. Trial and error, finding the things that work, and doing that more of that.
Yeah, I think when I was writing my second book and then editing it myself, I would be the third or fourth time I'd read it and go, wait, how did I not catch this mistake the first 3 times, right? It's always good to get fresh eyes, or in your case, fresh ears on something.
Exactly. We get stuck in our own context, and, we think everybody gets it they're where we are, but no, not necessarily.
Exactly. It makes perfect sense to us. Now, obviously, you have a very strong engineering background with a documented history of success. Your current role, to me, feels more people-focused, even though you have a long, deep history with doing engineering type work. And has that been an easy transition for you, or have you always been people-focused?
Let's see. I still actually do quite a bit of technical stuff, but my technical stuff is more in the explanation, not in the debugging. And I've been a long time since I've troubleshooted anything. I have always been somewhat people focused. I think it's taken me quite a while to develop my skill set there to where I am today. Of course, I initially got started. I was a software architect kind of right before I switched over into people management. And the way I made that switch at the time was to think about people and organization like a software architecture. You got connections, and you got data flowing back and forth, and you've got, organizational structure that's much like a command and control structure. You've got a lot of parallels there. And so that's kind of how I mentally made the transition initially. But, then also, it's interesting to think about schooling. I like to joke around that I had to take sociology as one of my electives to get my computer science degree. And I probably used that more than I use half of my computer science stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know I do a lot of project management work, and early in my career, doing the math was the most fun part, finding the critical path and doing the analysis. And then as my career progressed, I got more and more to figuring out it was most of your issues weren't technical in nature. They were probably the fact that you weren't working with the people in an effective way.
Yeah.
And they didn't feel like they could tell you the truth. And so they hid things. And so you had to, so now most of my focus is on the people side of project management and making sure that we're being inclusive. And I can talk bad about engineers because I am one. And, we have a tendency as engineers to want to go develop the perfect widget and go off to our cubicle and be left alone, right? Don't make me come to your marketing meetings, and please don't make me come to your stupid project management meetings. And let me go off and I'll design the perfect widget. And then I bring it back quite proud of what I developed and show it to the team. And the marketing person says, well,
what the heck is that?
Nobody wants that. If you had made this one change, we could have sold 1 million of them. But,
exactly. That's I led an agile transformation, early on, and it is so true. I mean, it's really bringing communication and people into these engineering process, right? It's about, hey, let's talk about this thing that we're going to go build, and let's go start building it, but let's get feedback all the way along, and let's do all the high risk stuff first. And all that stuff really is intended to bring, people and context and assumption and into the process early, so that what you do end up with is what you need. And you're right. I mean, the change management piece and the people piece, those are two of the most important things that I do, probably.
Yeah, I think in teamwork, there's process and there's people. And the process, there's usually a pretty straightforward way to get the process right. It's the people side that's more fluid, and I think really you have to work harder at, especially if you're somebody who may be heavy in math and technically focused, and you're really good one-on-one, maybe not one-on-many, right? And you have to, and so your tendency is to want to pull back into your shell and do the thing you're really, really good at, when we need you to be more extroverted and be inclusive of everybody, and not just hide in your shell and be around people just like yourself.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it comes back to getting that broad range of insight early on, as early as possible, frankly, is what's going to make you successful ultimately, even though it's painful early on in the process, or it can be, until you get into the rhythm of it. And then it can be exciting. It's like, hey, let's start with this and then see what we get.
Right.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Not always a natural process.
No, for some people it is, and some people not. But the thing is, you have to force people out of their silos, and we know that people like to be around people just like themselves. The analogy that I like to give is, if I'm teaching a class to 50 people, what always happens is all the engineers sit together because they speak the same language. They all took differential equations in college and bear that as a badge of honor. They all think Dilbert is hilarious, right? So they all get each other. And then all the IT people sit together because they also kind of speak the same language, and they don't mind sitting close to the engineers because they're both technically focused. But both groups want to sit as far away as possible from the marketing people, right? It is because they don't speak that language.
It's like a middle school dance, right? I always like a lot of the leadership training at GE. They put us together in like these little cells that are cross-functional, and it's like you have to learn how to do that, and then you realize after a while, like, hey, this actually works better than anything else,
So one of the tricks that I use is when we break into group exercises, I know that people sat together next to each other who like each other. So I'll count off. So they have to be in a different group. So I'll tell people, if you're sitting by your best friend, you're not going to work with them today, because projects are not about working with your best friend. It's about working with everybody. So
yeah, I like that.
You have to be thoughtful about that kind of stuff for sure.
Definitely makes a difference.
So I find the partnership between HR and leadership to be interesting. And can you tell us more about what falls into this, and what is it like being the bridge here?
I think about, my HR business partner is so critical to my success. And I think of that as an important partnership. Not just to walk through the different things going on, but if I were to boil it up to what really is important here, to me, that's about navigating the blind spots. I can provide a lot of context to what's going on and what could be happening, for a particular person or a particular team. And then, my HR business partner can do the same for me, looking at it from a different perspective. And so very much always find, I've worked with several HR business partners and always find that, a very extremely valuable partnership, just to be sure that am I really seeing what's going on? And are they understanding what's happening? I do actually quite a bit of, not just HR, but quite a bit of translation of, okay, here's what's happening right now, technically,
right?
Or with a customer, or with the business or whatever, and I can explain and understand that situation. But to put that together with what's happening with people and with teams or with an individual is also critically important. And so when you can really partner effectively there, then you really can eliminate a lot of the blind spots.
I find translation services to be incredibly important, because I can be working with two people there. One's marketing, one's engineering, and one person will say something and I could tell it did not resonate with the other person, and I'll translate. I think what they mean is, and put it in their terminology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much. I do quite a bit of that.
So what are some of the key characteristics you feel great leaders need to have?
Respect, willingness to learn, and action orientation. I think that again, just the ability from a person to engage with other people, to really listen, to acknowledge the inputs of others, but also not just to do that, but to move. Bias to action, really important.
Yeah, I think I like what you said there. Basically, I always ascribe to the mantra that you have two ears and one mouth, and you should use them in that ratio. And then, so I try to listen more than I talk. And the other thing is, even if I don't agree with the position someone else has, I just need to recognize that's their position and they believe in it. And whether
That's exactly right.
whether it resonates with me or not doesn't matter. It means it's important to them, and I just need to understand that, and be respectful of it, right?
And they have reason and experience that took them to that position. And when you understand that, you can act much more intelligently than if you didn't pause to understand it.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I like to ask everybody these same 3 questions. So, are there any leadership principles that speak to you personally and guide your day-to-day behaviors?
Not so surprisingly, value others' opinions and have confidence in your own.
I like that one. I haven't heard the second part before. That's good. Have confidence in your own. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Best piece of advice I was given was you can't let the job be bigger than you. I see a lot of people, and for myself, I've experienced this. You take on a new role, it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. You're trying to learn a lot. You're trying to figure out how to act. You're trying to do things. And I see a lot of people stumble in that first part because they just get overwhelmed. They're working 80 hours a week. They're doing whatever, just trying to not to drown. You can't let the job be bigger than you. You have to be able to give yourself the mental space to step back and think about it, take it one step at a time, and have patience and tenacity to stick with it. And remember that you took this role and people put you in this role because there's faith in your ability to do that role. But don't, you got to kind of work your way through that initial challenge.
I got to believe that's harder to do than to say, though.
Very much so. But keeping it in your mind helps, and and better to have your network know that too, so that they can help you do it.
No, I think that's great advice. I like that. And what's the best book or article you read recently, and what was the key takeaway?
I really love a book called Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. It is about how to make change. And the key, there's a ton of stuff in this book. I could go on for a couple hours, but one of the key things I really love about it is finding a way for bright spots, identifying bright spots. And too often when we look at things, we look at what's not working and how do we fix it? But instead, bright spots is about finding the things that are working and how to amplify them. And so that helps you build positive momentum for change, that you can continue going. So I really love that aspect.
I think that's so hard to do of human nature, isn't it? We tend to focus on what didn't go right or didn't go well, and try to shore up our weaknesses. When I think it's Tiger Woods that doesn't even try to work on his weaknesses. He just takes his things he's really good at, and just tries to get even better at it, right? Because that's where his greater gain can be.
It's a better story, and I think people are more willing to follow success than failure, than try to fix failure. It's an easier psychological win to pick a bright spot and amplify it.
Yeah, for sure. Even though I think we as human beings, we are more self-critical.
Always.
We tend to beat ourselves up more.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Well, Kristen, this has really been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for the conversation today.
Thanks for having me today. I really, really enjoyed talking to you. Very, very exciting.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.